I am Marcus, 32 years old, and working as a financial advisor in Chicago. Last year I discovered my parents had taken out a $170,000 loan in my name to fund my younger brother Dylan's extravagant lifestyle. The betrayal cut deep, especially after a lifetime of being second best. They regret it now, but their remorse came too late to stop what I set in motion. Before I dive into how my family imploded, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family who took advantage of you. Growing up in a quiet suburb outside Portland, our family seemed normal from the outside. My parents, Robert and Linda, worked steady jobs that provided us with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. Dad managed a local hardware store while Mom taught 4th grade at the elementary school. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where neighborhood kids gathered to play basketball on weekends. On the surface, we appeared to be the typical American family, but beneath that facade lay a painful reality I struggled with every day. From my earliest memories, it was clear my brother Dylan held a special place in my parents' hearts that I could never reach. 3 years younger than me, Dylan somehow became the sun around which our family orbited. His arrival when I was 3 transformed me from cherished only child to the invisible older brother. I still remember my 6th birthday when my parents forgot to buy a cake because Dylan had a cold. They scrambled to make cupcakes after I asked where my cake was, but the damage was already done. That pattern continued throughout our childhood. My achievements were footnotes, while Dylan's smallest accomplishments earned lavish praise and celebration. In 4th grade, I won the school spelling bee and brought home a blue ribbon. My mother glanced at it and said, "That is nice, Marcus," before turning her attention back to 3-year-old Dylan, who was stacking blocks. "Look at how smart Dylan is with those blocks. He will be an architect someday." My ribbon ended up in a drawer while Dylan's finger paintings covered our refrigerator. Sports equipment illustrated the disparity perfectly. When I joined the baseball team at 10, my parents bought me a second-hand glove from a garage sale. 2 years later, when Dylan showed interest in baseball, they purchased top-of-the-line equipment, including a custom bat with his name engraved on it. He quit after 3 practices, and the expensive gear gathered dust in the garage. Meanwhile, I continued playing with my worn glove for 3 seasons, earning a starting position despite the equipment disadvantage. Birthdays and Christmas revealed their favoritism most blatantly. On my 16th birthday, I received a practical gift of new socks and school supplies. 6 months later, when Dylan turned 13, my parents surprised him with a brand new mountain bike. The following Christmas, my gift was a sweater, while Dylan received a guitar and expensive lessons, despite showing no prior interest in music. The guitar joined the baseball equipment in the garage after 2 weeks. No matter how hard I tried, I could not earn the love and attention they freely gave Dylan. I maintained perfect grades, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and worked part-time jobs starting at 15. Each achievement and contribution to the family was met with the same lukewarm acknowledgement. "That is nice, Marcus." By senior year of high school, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. When college application season arrived, I researched schools' completed applications and sought scholarships entirely on my own. My parents attended every one of Dylan's mediocre soccer games, but skipped my Honor Society induction ceremony to take him shopping for new sneakers. Through persistence and academic excellence, I secured a partial scholarship to State University. When acceptance letters arrived, my mother glanced at mine and said, "That is good, but the scholarship does not cover everything. We cannot help much with tuition." Meanwhile, they were already saving for Dylan's education fund, though he showed little academic promise. The day I left for college remains etched in my memory. My father gave me an awkward handshake while my mother offered a distracted hug before turning to remind Dylan about his dental appointment that afternoon. I packed my second-hand car with everything I owned and drove away, tears streaming down my face, as I realized no one was watching me leave in the rearview mirror. College became my sanctuary. For the first time, I existed without being in Dylan's shadow. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load in accounting. Between serving coffee at the campus cafe at dawn, tutoring students in mathematics during lunch breaks, and restocking library shelves until midnight, I barely had time to sleep. But the exhaustion felt better than the constant emotional neglect at home. Visits home during holidays only reinforced the painful dynamic. Dylan had dropped out of community college after one semester, claiming it was not his thing. Rather than expressing disappointment, my parents nodded understandingly and suggested he find his passion. He spent his days playing video games and hanging out with friends while I continued working and studying relentlessly. During one Thanksgiving break, I announced I had made the dean's list for the third consecutive semester. My father nodded distractedly while my mother quickly changed the subject to Dylan's new interest in photography. They had already purchased an expensive camera for him, which sat unused on his cluttered desk. Later that evening, I overheard my mother gushing to a relative on the phone about Dylan's artistic eye, while no mention was made of my academic success. Christmas visits became shorter each year, as the contrast between how they treated us grew more painful to witness. During my junior year holiday visit, I sat silently as my parents lavished Dylan with expensive gifts despite his continued unemployment. When I mentioned my internship offer at a prestigious accounting firm, my father cut me off mid-sentence to ask Dylan about his plans to travel through Europe, a trip they were funding, despite having told me they could not help with my tuition. By senior year, I limited my visits to one day during major holidays. The pattern never changed, but my ability to tolerate it diminished with each encounter. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance, having paid my own way through college through scholarships, loans, and countless hours of work. My parents attended the ceremony but left early because Dylan called complaining of boredom at home alone. That graduation day, standing in my cap and gown with only half my family present to witness my achievement, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I would build a future based on my own merit, far from the constant reminder of my second-class status in my family. Chicago became my destination, and within 2 weeks of graduation, I packed everything I owned and headed east without looking back. Chicago welcomed me with open arms and endless opportunities. Starting as an entry-level financial advisor at a mid-sized firm, I threw myself into building a career from scratch. My apartment was tiny little more than a studio with a kitchenette and bathroom so small I could barely turn around in it. But it was mine, paid for with my own hard-earned money, and that made it feel like a palace. The first few years were challenging as I navigated city life while establishing myself professionally. Long hours at the office, continuing education courses at night and weekends, spent studying for additional certifications filled my calendar. Slowly but surely my client list grew, as did my reputation for honest, thorough financial guidance. As my professional life flourished, I began developing meaningful friendships that filled the familial void. Sarah, a graphic designer who lived in my building, became the sister I never had. We bonded over late-night conversations about our dysfunctional families and ambitious dreams. Michael, a corporate attorney I met at a networking event, quickly became my closest male friend and trusted advisor. These chosen family members supported me through promotions, relationship struggles, and the occasional crisis of confidence. They celebrated my victories and offered shoulders to lean on during defeats. For the first time in my life, I experienced what unconditional support felt like. Contact with my biological family dwindled to occasional phone calls on major holidays. These conversations followed a predictable pattern: brief inquiries about my work, followed by lengthy updates about Dylan's latest endeavors. Despite approaching 30, my brother remained unemployed, living at home and entirely dependent on our parents. Dylan is exploring his options, my mother would say, as though perpetual unemployment was a noble pursuit rather than a failure to launch. My father would chime in with updates about Dylan's newest interest, always accompanied by expensive equipment purchases that would inevitably be abandoned within weeks. I found purpose in helping clients secure their financial futures. After years of witnessing my parents' financial favoritism, I took particular satisfaction in guiding families to make equitable provisions for their children. 10 years passed in this manner, with Chicago becoming truly home and my career advancing steadily. Then came the day that shattered the delicate balance I had achieved. A Tuesday morning in April, I was reviewing client portfolios when my phone pinged with a credit alert. Thinking it was likely a routine notification, I opened the app during my lunch break. What I saw made my stomach drop: a notification about delinquent payments on a $170,000 loan listed under my name. Confusion gave way to panic as I scrolled through the details. According to the alert, I was 3 months behind on payments for a loan I had never taken out. My first thought was identity theft by some anonymous criminal. Never did I imagine the thieves would be my own parents. I immediately called the loan company, heart pounding, as I navigated the automated system to reach a representative. The customer service agent verified my identity and confirmed the loan details. It had been originated 8 years earlier when I was 22, still finishing college. The primary borrower was indeed Marcus Johnson with my social security number. "I never took out this loan," I insisted, voice shaking. "This must be fraud." The representative explained the process for disputing fraudulent accounts and promised to email documentation. Within minutes, loan documents appeared in my inbox, and what I saw made me physically ill. There was my name, my social security number, and what appeared to be my signature alongside my parents' names as co-borrowers. The loan address matched my parents' home in Portland. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. My hands trembled as I scrolled through page after page of documents for a loan I had never agreed to. Nausea washed over me in waves as the implications became clear. My own parents had committed identity theft against me. Leaving work early, I drove home in a daze, nearly missing my exit twice. Inside my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the loan documents I had printed before leaving the office. After several deep breaths, I dialed my parents' number, hoping against hope there was some explanation beyond the obvious. My mother answered with her usual distracted tone. When I asked about the loan, expecting shock or denial, her casual response sent ice through my veins. "Oh, that," she said, as though I had inquired about some minor household repair. "We needed to help Dylan with some of his business ventures and expenses. You were always so good with money, we figured you would understand." "Business ventures," I repeated, my voice hollow. "What business ventures?" My father took the phone, his tone defensive. "Dylan has had several promising opportunities. The car detailing service, his photography business, that organic juice bar concept, plus his trip to find himself in Europe and Asia." The room spun around me as I gripped the phone tighter. Those were all failures that never got off the ground. And finding himself, that was a luxury vacation, where he posted beach photos for 6 months. Everyone finds their path differently. My mother interjected, having apparently taken the phone back. "Dylan is a free spirit. He needs space to discover his purpose. And that justifies committing fraud against me." My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "That justifies stealing my identity and putting me in debt for his failures." A moment of uncomfortable silence followed before my father spoke again. "We always intended to pay it off, but things have been tight lately with helping Dylan with his new food truck idea. We thought, since you are doing so well in Chicago, you could help out with the payments." Family helps family, Marcus. The casual expectation that I would simply accept their fraud and assume responsibility for their debt broke something inside me. I had spent my entire life accepting second place in their hearts, working twice as hard for half the recognition, and now they expected me to pay for their continued enabling of my brother. The call ended with my voice shaking too much to continue. I hung up and collapsed onto my bedroom floor, violent sobs racking my body until I had no tears left. That night I barely slept, alternating between rage, disbelief, and profound grief. By morning, one thing had become crystal clear. I could no longer allow my family to take advantage of me. For the first time in my life, I would put myself first. The morning after discovering the fraudulent loan, I called in sick to work, something I had rarely done in my decade of employment. My boss, concerned by the uncharacteristic request, asked if everything was all right. I managed a vague explanation about a family emergency, which was true in the most twisted sense. Once the call ended, I contacted Michael, whose expertise as an attorney had never been more needed. Though he specialized in corporate law rather than criminal matters, he arrived at my apartment within an hour, legal pad in hand, and concern etched across his face. "Identity theft is serious," he said after I explained the situation, disbelief evident in his voice. "But when the perpetrators are your own parents, it adds layers of complexity." Michael helped me organize what we knew and what evidence we needed to collect. We printed all communication with the loan company documentation, showing my residence in Chicago during the loan origination, proof of my lack of knowledge or benefit from the funds, and evidence of the fraudulent signature. "The signature is good," Michael noted, comparing it to my actual signature on other documents. "Too good." Did your parents have access to documents with your signature they could have copied? I remembered the scholarship and student loan papers I had left at their house during college. The realization that they had likely practiced forging my signature made me physically sick again. Over the next 3 days, I compiled a comprehensive file of evidence while continuing to communicate with the loan company's fraud department. Each new discovery deepened the betrayal. The investigation revealed not one but several loans taken in my name totaling nearly $170,000. You need to file a police report, Michael advised reluctantly. I know these are your parents, but legally speaking, this is clear-cut identity theft. I need to confront them first, I insisted. Face to face. Michael disagreed but respected my decision. Within 48 hours, I had booked a flight to Portland, arranged emergency leave from work, and prepared myself as best I could for the confrontation to come. The flight to Portland gave me 5 hours to rehearse what I would say. Yet no amount of preparation could have readied me for the emotions that flooded through me as I drove a rental car down the familiar streets of my hometown. Everything looked smaller, somehow less significant than in my memories. My parents' house appeared largely unchanged since my last visit 2 years earlier. The modest ranch-style home needed a fresh coat of paint, and the lawn showed signs of neglect. What stood out in sharp contrast were the vehicles in the driveway, a brand-new SUV and a sporty coupe that likely cost more than my annual salary. The sight of those cars purchased while my credit was being destroyed stoked the anger simmering inside me. I had texted my mother that morning to announce my surprise visit, receiving an enthusiastic response suggesting I join them for dinner. No mention was made of our tense phone conversation days earlier. This denial of reality was painfully familiar, a family pattern where unpleasant truths were simply ignored until they disappeared. The front door opened before I could knock, revealing my mother's smiling face. "Marcus, what a wonderful surprise," she exclaimed, embracing me, as though nothing was wrong. My father appeared behind her, offering an awkward pat on my shoulder. "Good to see you, son," he said, the familiar emotional distance evident in his tone. "Dylan will be excited you are here." I entered the house immediately, noticing new furniture and an expensive-looking entertainment system in the living room. Every visible improvement screamed of the misappropriated funds that bore my name. Dylan arrived shortly after sauntering in without knocking. At 29, my brother still possessed the carefree demeanor of a teenager. Designer clothes, professionally styled hair, and a new smartwatch adorned his perpetually unemployed frame. "Big bro," he exclaimed, giving me a one-armed hug. "Long time no see, just got back from Cabo last week. You should have seen the resort, absolutely insane luxury." Dinner was surreal. My mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, a detail that might have touched me under different circumstances. Instead, it felt like a manipulation, a preemptive attempt to soften the confrontation she surely knew was coming. Throughout the meal, Dylan dominated the conversation with stories of his recent travels and plans for yet another business venture. This time, a premium dog walking service targeting wealthy neighborhoods. "I just need some startup capital for marketing and a decent vehicle to transport the dogs," he explained, looking pointedly at our parents. "Something with good interior protection, since you know dogs shed and all." My father nodded thoughtfully. "We will figure something out. Your last business ideas were solid, just ahead of their time." I nearly choked on my food. His last business ideas had included a failed coffee shop that closed after 3 months, an aborted clothing line that never produced a single garment, and a luxury car detailing service that folded after Dylan scratched a client's Porsche. The breaking point came when my mother began clearing dishes and casually mentioned, "Marcus, your brother, could really use your financial expertise for his new business plan. Since you work with money all day, maybe you could help him secure a small business loan." The audacity of this request after what they had done shattered my remaining composure. I set down my fork with deliberate slowness and looked each family member in the eye before speaking. "Actually, I have been dealing with an interesting financial situation lately." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "Someone took out loans, totaling $170,000 in my name without my knowledge or consent. Any idea who might have done that?" The kitchen fell silent. My mother froze midway to the sink, plates in hand. My father suddenly became intensely interested in his water glass. Only Dylan appeared genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked, looking between our parents. "Mom and Dad took out loans using my identity," I explained, maintaining eye contact with my brother, "to fund your failed business's travels and lifestyle." Dylan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, to a disturbing lack of concern. "Well, that sucks, but family helps. Family right. You make good money in Chicago. Just pay it off and move on." His casual dismissal of fraud committed against me confirmed everything I had suspected about our family dynamic. To them, I existed primarily as a resource to be exploited for Dylan's benefit. "It is identity theft," I said flatly. "A federal crime punishable by prison time." My mother finally set down the dishes, her hands visibly shaking. "Marcus, you are overreacting. We always intended to pay those loans. Things have just been tight lately with helping Dylan get established." "Get established," I repeated incredulously. "He is 29 years old and has never held a job for more than 3 months. You have been establishing him for a decade with my stolen credit." My father stood abruptly. "Watch your tone. Your brother has special needs." "What special needs?" I demanded. "His only special need is having parents who never required him to face consequences." The argument escalated quickly, decades of resentment pouring out of me in a torrent of hurt and anger. I detailed every instance of favoritism I could remember, from childhood birthdays to college tuition. With each example, my parents grew more defensive while Dylan became increasingly indignant. "You always were jealous of me," Dylan accused, pointing a finger at my chest. "Just because Mom and Dad recognized my potential while you were always so boring and predictable." "Potential?" I laughed bitterly. "What potential have you actually realized? What have you accomplished, besides spending other people's money?" The confrontation reached its peak when I spread the loan documents across the dinner table, pointing out the forged signatures and false information. "I never lived at this address when these loans were taken out," I said, voice shaking with emotion. "I never applied for them, never received the money, and never agreed to repay them. This is fraud, pure and simple." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across my parents' faces as the reality of their actions began to sink in. "You would not press charges against your own parents," my mother whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Why not?" I asked quietly. "You had no problem committing crimes against your own son." Dylan stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. I am not listening to this guilt trip." He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, effectively abandoning our parents to face the consequences alone. In that moment, watching my brother walk away from the mess he had benefited from, something crystallized within me. This pattern would never change, unless I forced it to change. My parents would continue enabling Dylan at my expense unless I created boundaries with real consequences. "I am filing a police report for identity theft," I announced, gathering the documents from the table. "You have 48 hours to contact me with a plan to take full responsibility for these loans. After that, I cannot guarantee I will be willing to negotiate." I left them sitting in stunned silence, the remains of our family dinner growing cold on the table. Walking to my rental car, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier, liberated by my stand, yet burdened by the knowledge that our family would never be the same again. Returning to Chicago after the confrontation felt like emerging from a storm into eerie calm. My apartment, once a sanctuary from family drama, now seemed filled with the ghosts of betrayal. Sleep evaded me, as conversations with my parents replayed in my mind, their justifications and minimizations echoing in the darkness. True to his word, Michael had arranged a meeting with Jennifer Ramirez, an attorney specializing in identity theft cases. Her office exuded efficiency and discretion, with diplomas lining the walls and a desk free of clutter. She listened intently as I detailed the fraud, her expression remaining professionally neutral, even as my voice occasionally broke with emotion. "Unfortunately, cases involving family members are all too common," she explained once I had finished. "People assume blood ties grant them permission to take liberties they would never consider with strangers." Jennifer outlined my options with clinical precision. I could press criminal charges against my parents, which would likely result in probation for first-time offenders, but would create a permanent criminal record. Alternatively, I could pursue only civil remedies to remove the debt from my name, which might be less effective but would avoid criminal proceedings against my family. This is ultimately your decision, she concluded. But consider this. If you do not establish clear legal boundaries now, what prevents them from doing this again? Her question haunted me throughout the sleepless night that followed. By morning, I had made my decision. I would protect myself fully, even if that meant my parents facing criminal charges. A lifetime of putting their feelings above my well-being had led to this moment. It was time to prioritize my own welfare. The process began with filing a detailed police report documenting the identity theft. The officer taking my statement maintained professional composure, but I caught flickers of sympathy in her eyes. As I explained, the perpetrators were my own parents. Family fraud cases are particularly difficult, she acknowledged, handing me the report number. But you are doing the right thing, protecting yourself. Next came credit bureau disputes, freezing my credit to prevent further fraud and formal communication with the loan companies. Jennifer handled most of these steps. Her experience navigating the labyrinthine processes, saving me countless hours of frustration. 3 days after filing the police report, my parents were served with legal notice of the charges. The floodgates opened immediately. My phone filled with voicemails from my sobbing mother, each message more desperate than the last. "Marcus, please call us back," she pleaded in one message. "We can work this out as a family. There is no need for police and lawyers." My father's messages started with anger, but quickly devolved into panic as the severity of their situation became clear. "You have made your point," his gruff voice declared. "Now stop this nonsense before you destroy this family completely." By the 6th message, his tone had transformed entirely. "Son, please. We made a terrible mistake. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since the police called. We will figure out how to make this right." Dylan predictably remained silent throughout this initial phase. His absence spoke volumes about his character and the role he had played in our family dysfunction. He had happily accepted the benefits of my parents' crime, but vanished when consequences appeared. A week into the legal process, my parents made their first attempt at resolution. My father called with a proposal they would pay $30,000 immediately if I dropped all charges. The amount represented less than 20% of the total fraudulent debt. "That is not going to work," I replied, Jennifer's coaching helping me maintain boundaries. "The full amount needs to be addressed and my credit needs to be restored completely." "We do not have that kind of money available right now," he admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "We spent most of our savings helping Dylan with his business ventures." "That is unfortunate." I responded, surprising myself with my steadiness. "But it does not change the reality of what was done in my name." As weeks passed, the emotional toll became increasingly difficult to bear. Nightmares disrupted my already fragmented sleep. In one recurring dream, I discovered my identity had been completely erased, replaced by Dylan's name on all my identification and achievements. I would wake gasping for air, drenched in sweat. Recognizing the psychological impact, Michael and Sarah insisted I begin seeing a therapist. Dr. Lindstrom specialized in family trauma and betrayal. Our weekly sessions became anchors in the stormy sea of legal proceedings and family fallout. "What you are experiencing is a complex grief," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "You are mourning not just the current betrayal, but the family relationship you deserved but never had." Meanwhile, my parents' desperation intensified as court dates were set, and the legal machinery advanced inexorably. My mother's calls became more manipulative, attempting to leverage childhood memories and familial obligation. "Remember how we took care of you when you had pneumonia in 4th grade?" she asked during one call. "We sat by your bed for 3 days straight. How can you do this to the parents who gave you life and raised you?" I nearly wavered until Dr. Lindstrom helped me recognize the manipulation. "They are referencing a rare instance of basic parental care while ignoring years of emotional neglect and a major crime against you," she pointed out. "That is classic Darvo deny attack reverse victim and offender." My father's approach shifted to financial threats. "If we have to pay all this money back, we will lose the house," he warned. Is that what you want? To make your own parents homeless? Jennifer advised me to restrict communication to email and to involve her in all exchanges. They are trying to manipulate you through guilt and fear, she observed. Classic tactics of emotional abusers when losing control. As the preliminary hearing approached, my parents made one final desperate attempt at settlement. They offered to sign a legally binding agreement acknowledging the loans as theirs plus a payment of $50,000 if I would drop the criminal charges. It is the best we can do, my father insisted during a conference call with our respective attorneys. We would have to sell the house to pay more. Then sell the house, I heard myself say, surprising everyone on the call. You were willing to steal my financial future. Why should I care about your house? The silence that followed felt like a turning point. For perhaps the first time, my parents confronted the reality that I would no longer sacrifice my well-being for their comfort or Dylan's benefit. Throughout these tumultuous weeks, my support system proved invaluable. Sarah brought home cooked meals to ensure I ate properly. Michael provided legal insights and emotional support during my darkest moments. End quote. Colleagues covered assignments when legal matters required my attention. These acts of genuine care highlighted what had been missing in my family relationships all along. As the court date loomed closer, my parents' communications grew increasingly frantic. They finally realized I would not back down. The fantasy that I would ultimately absorb the damage of their actions as I had absorbed emotional blows throughout childhood was dissolving before their eyes. Marcus, please, my mother sobbed in her final voicemail before the hearing. We are your parents. Family should not do this to family. The irony of her statement was not lost on me. Indeed, family should not do this to family. They should not commit fraud against their children. They should not steal identities and destroy credit histories. They should not sacrifice one child's welfare for another's indulgence. Family should not do exactly what they had done to me for 32 years. The county courthouse loomed imposingly against the gray Portland sky as I climbed the stone steps beside Jennifer. My charcoal suit felt too tight despite fitting perfectly, my collar constricting like an unwelcome hand around my throat. Inside my briefcase were copies of all the evidence we had gathered, loan documents, credit reports, proof of residency in Chicago, and a detailed timeline of the fraud. Remember, stay calm and answer only what is asked. Jennifer reminded me as we passed through security. Let the evidence speak for itself. The courtroom's polished wooden benches and formal atmosphere heightened my anxiety. Jennifer guided me to our designated table, arranging our materials with practiced efficiency. When my parents entered with their attorney, a middle-aged man with a perpetually furrowed brow, I kept my gaze fixed forward, unable to bear the sight of them. Peripheral vision betrayed glimpses nonetheless. My mother's red-rimmed eyes, my father's unusually rumpled appearance, both looking smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of their actions exposed to public scrutiny. Dylan's absence was conspicuous, but utterly predictable. Judge Harriet Kimball entered the courtroom, her stern expression, suggesting she had seen every variety of human failing during her tenure on the bench. After preliminary introductions, the proceedings began with the presentation of evidence. Jennifer methodically laid out our case. The loans taken without my knowledge, the forged signatures, the proof I resided in Chicago when the documents listed my address as my parents' home in Portland, the absence of any benefit to me from the fraudulently obtained funds. Each exhibit built upon the last, creating an irrefutable narrative of deliberate identity theft. When my parents' attorney presented their defense, it centered primarily on mitigating factors rather than denying the basic facts. He emphasized their clean prior records, community standing, and the family context of the situation. The phrase, "no malicious intent," featured prominently, as did references to their age and potential hardship from severe penalties. Judge Kimball's expression grew increasingly grave as the evidence mounted. When she finally spoke directly to my parents, her voice carried the weight of decades dispensing justice. In my 30 years on the bench, family, financial abuse cases are among the most troubling I encounter, she stated, fixing them with a penetrating stare. The betrayal of trust between parent and child strikes at the foundation of what family should represent. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you exploited your son's good credit and trust for years to finance another child's lifestyle. This court finds such behavior particularly reprehensible. My mother began to weep softly while my father stared at the floor, shoulders slumped in defeat. For a moment I felt a flicker of the old familiar guilt, the lifetime habit of feeling responsible for their emotional comfort. Jennifer seemed to sense this internal struggle and placed a steadying hand briefly on my arm. After consulting with the prosecutors, my parents' attorney approached with a plea deal offer. They would plead guilty to identity theft charges in exchange for probation rather than jail time, provided they accepted full financial responsibility for the fraudulent loans and agreed to a strict repayment schedule. This is a reasonable outcome, Jennifer advised quietly. It protects your financial future while avoiding the most severe criminal penalties for your parents. After consideration, I agreed to the terms. What I wanted was not vengeance, but protection and acknowledgement of the wrong done to me. The plea agreement accomplished both objectives without excessive punishment. When the judge formally accepted the plea deal, she addressed me directly for the first time. Mr. Johnson, the court recognizes the difficulty of your position and commends your courage in addressing this matter legally rather than allowing the exploitation to continue. The loans will be removed from your credit record, and your parents will bear full responsibility for repayment. Turning back to my parents, her voice hardened again. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, you will serve 3 years, probation pay, full restitution, according to the schedule. Established complete 200 hours of community service and attend financial ethics counseling. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate incarceration. Do you understand these conditions? They nodded, meekly, voices barely audible as they answered, Yes, Your Honor. As the proceedings concluded, I gathered my documents without looking in my parents' direction. Their attorney approached, asking if I would speak with them briefly in the hallway. Jennifer left the decision to me. I have nothing to say today, I responded quietly. Perhaps in the future, but not now. Walking down the courthouse steps into the cool afternoon air, I experienced conflicting emotions, vindication that justice had been served, grief for the family relationship that now lay in ruins, and a strange weightlessness as though an invisible burden I had carried my entire life had finally been lifted. The flight back to Chicago gave me hours of uninterrupted contemplation. Though legal victory provided a measure of justice, it could not heal the emotional wounds inflicted over decades. That healing, I realized, would require time, distance, and the continued support of the chosen family who had stood by me throughout this ordeal. Returning to work the following week, I found unexpected understanding from my supervisor and colleagues. While I had provided only vague explanations about a family legal matter, their support remained unwavering. Immersing myself in client portfolios and financial planning provided welcome distraction from personal turmoil. 3 weeks after the court proceedings, I received an email from a cousin in Portland with news about my parents. They had listed their house for sale, needing the equity to begin addressing the fraudulent debt. According to family gossip, they were moving to a small apartment across town, downsizing dramatically for the first time in their lives. More surprising was the news about Dylan. With our parents' financial support suddenly restricted by court-ordered repayments, my brother had been forced to find employment for the first time in years. He had taken a position at a local electronics store, working retail hours for modest wages. The cousin reported he was extremely unhappy with this development, blaming me entirely for his reduced circumstances. The news triggered complex emotions. Part of me felt vindicated seeing natural consequences finally reaching my brother after years of insulation from reality. Another part felt lingering guilt for disrupting the family system, irrational though that guilt might be. Dr. Lindstrom helped me process these conflicting feelings during our sessions. The discomfort you feel is not evidence you made the wrong choice, she explained. It is the natural response to changing long-established patterns, even destructive ones. Your parents and brother are experiencing the consequences of their own actions, not your decision to protect yourself. A month after the hearing, I received my first direct communication from my father since court, a brief email with uncharacteristic humility. Marcus, I know words cannot undo what we did. The court was right about everything. We betrayed you in the worst way possible after years of failing you as parents. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I am truly sorry. We are getting help to understand how we went so wrong. Dad. The message left me speechless. Never in my life had I heard my father acknowledge wrongdoing so directly. Whether the change represented genuine growth or merely the shock of consequences, I could not yet determine. I saved the email but did not immediately respond, needing time to process this unexpected development. While my parents began their journey of legal and personal reckoning, I focused on rebuilding my life with stronger boundaries and deeper self-understanding. The credit bureaus removed the fraudulent accounts from my reports, gradually restoring my once excellent score. Jennifer helped me establish comprehensive credit monitoring and identity protection to prevent future violations. More importantly, therapy helped me recognize and begin healing the emotional damage from years of being the less favored child. Lindstrom observed the identity theft was merely the most tangible manifestation of a lifetime of having my needs and worth dismissed. Your parents saw you as a resource, rather than a person with your own legitimate needs, she noted during one breakthrough session. That perspective informed their parenting from your earliest years through this recent exploitation. Understanding this pattern helped me recognize it was never about any personal deficiency on my part. No achievement, no success, no amount of perfection would have changed my place in the family hierarchy. This realization, painful as it was, finally freed me from the endless cycle of seeking approval I would never receive. 6 months after the court hearing, Chicago entered that perfect autumn sweet spot where the air turns crisp, but sunshine still warms the afternoon. I had just finished meeting with a client when my phone buzzed with a notification. An email from my mother waited in my inbox, the first direct communication I had received from her since the court proceedings. For several minutes I stared at the notification finger hovering over the screen. Opening this message meant reconnecting with the pain and betrayal I had worked so hard to process. Yet, ignoring it meant remaining in emotional limbo, neither moving forward nor finding resolution. Finally, sitting on a park bench near my office, I opened the email. Dear Marcus, your father and I have been in counseling for the past 4 months. Our therapist suggested I write to you not to ask forgiveness, but to acknowledge the harm we caused. I realize now we consistently prioritize Dylan's wants over your needs throughout your life. The loans were the worst example, but not the only one. I understand if you never wish to speak to us again. We are working to become better people, even if too late to be the parents you deserved. With regret and hope, Mom. The sincerity surprised me. Throughout my childhood, my mother had excelled at subtle manipulation and emotional maneuvering. This message contained none of those familiar tactics, just straightforward accountability. I shared the email with Dr. Lindstrom during our next session, seeking her professional assessment. There are promising elements here, she noted cautiously. The acknowledgement of a pattern rather than isolated incidents. The absence of expectations for forgiveness. The lack of excuses. These suggest potential for genuine change, though only time will reveal whether it is sustainable. Over the following weeks, more emails arrived from both parents, each respecting my silence while providing updates on their progress. They had committed to weekly marriage counseling, addressing their dysfunctional parenting patterns. My father had joined a support group for parents estranged from adult children. My mother had begun volunteering with a financial literacy program for low-income families, a form of community service that seemed particularly fitting given her crimes. Most surprisingly, they shared that Dylan had moved out of their apartment and was maintaining his retail job. According to my father, he was angry at first, blaming everyone but himself. Recently, he has shown small signs of maturing, though he has a long journey ahead. 3 months of this one-sided communication passed before I felt ready to respond. My reply was brief, but opened a door I had previously thought permanently closed. Thank you for respecting my space and for the updates. I am not ready for phone calls or visits, but I am willing to continue email communication. That measured response initiated a new phase in our relationship. Our exchanges remained cautious, but gradually increased in frequency and depth. I learned more about their downsized life, the progress of their therapy, and their growing recognition of how their parenting had harmed both their children, albeit in different ways. By never requiring Dylan to face consequences, we crippled his development, my mother wrote in one particularly insightful message. And by never giving you the recognition and support you deserved, we drove you away and violated your trust. Neither approach served either of you well. After 4 months of written communication, I agreed to a video call with my parents and their therapist. Seeing their faces for the first time since court was jarring. They had aged, visibly stress etching new lines around their eyes and mouth. Their apartment background looked modest compared to the home I had grown up in, a tangible reminder of how dramatically their circumstances had changed. The therapist facilitated a structured conversation, establishing ground rules that allowed each person to speak without interruption. My parents expressed remorse without excuses, acknowledging specific instances of favoritism and neglect throughout my childhood. When my turn came, I articulated the lifetime of hurt their actions had caused, from childhood slights to the devastating betrayal of identity theft. The hardest part, I admitted, voice occasionally catching, was realizing that the people who should have protected me most were willing to sacrifice my future for Dylan's comfort. That revelation forced me to reconsider every memory, every interaction, through a new lens. The session was emotionally exhausting but constructive. We agreed to continue monthly video calls with professional facilitation, a pace that felt manageable for my ongoing healing process. Meanwhile, my professional life flourished in unexpected ways. The skills I had developed navigating family trauma translated into deeper empathy for clients facing financial challenges. My boss noticed this evolution and offered me a promotion to senior financial advisor with responsibility for high-value client relationships requiring particular sensitivity and discretion. Your recent personal challenges seem to have enhanced your already strong client communication skills, she noted during my performance review. Clients report feeling truly heard and understood when working with you. My personal relationships also deepened as I brought new emotional awareness to friendships and dating. After years of seeking validation through achievement and accommodation, I began recognizing my intrinsic worth, independent of external approval. This shift allowed me to establish healthier boundaries and express needs more directly. 7 months into our tentative reconciliation, my parents extended a Thanksgiving invitation. The prospect of returning to Portland, of sitting at a table with the family that had betrayed me, triggered intense anxiety. Dr. Lindstrom helped me work through these feelings and establish conditions that would make the visit emotionally safe. You need to stay at a hotel, not their home, she advised. Maintain physical space where you can retreat and process. Consider a shortened visit, perhaps just the meal itself rather than an entire weekend, and identify specific behaviors that would prompt you to leave immediately. Armed with these boundaries and extensive preparation with my therapist, I accepted the invitation with clear parameters. My parents readily agreed to all conditions, another sign of their continuing efforts to respect my needs. The Thanksgiving visit proved less traumatic than feared. Their apartment was modest, but warm, decorated with familiar family photos, including several of me that had never been displayed in our family home. The meal was simple compared to holiday feasts of the past, reflecting their reduced financial circumstances. Most notably, my parents treated me with a respect I had never experienced from them before. They asked thoughtful questions about my work and life in Chicago, listened attentively to my responses, and refrained from dominating conversation with updates about Dylan. My brother attended briefly, arriving late and leaving early. Our interaction remained stiff and minimal. Unlike our parents, Dylan showed little recognition of his role in the family dysfunction or the harm I had experienced. His grudging acknowledgement of my presence suggested he still viewed me primarily as the person who had disrupted his comfortable lifestyle. Returning to Chicago after that visit, I realized my relationship with my parents had fundamentally transformed. The old dynamics of neglect and exploitation had been replaced by something tentative but potentially healthier. While complete trust might never be possible, a form of guarded relationship seemed increasingly viable. More importantly, I had transformed. The process of standing up for myself, facing painful truths, and establishing boundaries had forged a stronger, more authentic version of Marcus Johnson. I no longer defined myself as the overlooked son or the family victim. Instead, I was becoming a person defined by my values, choices, and the life I was actively creating. 1 year after discovering the fraudulent loans, I stood at my office window watching Chicago's skyline glitter against the evening sky. The city had become truly home in ways Portland never had its energy and opportunities aligning perfectly with the person I had become. My credit score had recovered completely the fraudulent accounts long removed from my reports. The promotion to senior financial advisor had brought increased responsibility and compensation, allowing me to move to a larger apartment with a view I never tired of admiring. Professional recognition, once pursued as substitute for parental approval, now felt satisfying on its own terms. Contact with my parents continued on a controlled, limited basis. Monthly video calls, occasional emails, and carefully planned visits established a new pattern of interaction based on mutual respect rather than obligation. While our relationship would never be carefree or completely trusting, it had evolved into something functional and occasionally rewarding. Their transformation appeared genuine and sustained. They continued therapy both individually and as a couple, gradually developing insights into their dysfunctional parenting patterns. The court-mandated financial ethics counseling had expanded into broader personal growth work that seemed to genuinely engage them. I never realized how much my own childhood experiences shaped my parenting, my father shared during a recent call. My parents always favored my sister, and instead of breaking that pattern with my own children, I perpetuated it. That understanding does not excuse what we did, but it helps me recognize and change those ingrained responses. My mother had found unexpected fulfillment in her community service, continuing as a volunteer financial literacy educator long after completing her court-required hours. Helping people understand how to protect themselves financially feels like a small way to make amends for the harm we caused, she explained. Dylan remained the family member least changed by the events of the past year. After initially blaming me for his reduced circumstances, he had grudgingly adapted to financial independence. He maintained his retail position and had recently enrolled in community college business classes, small steps toward maturity that would have been unthinkable during his years of complete dependence. Our relationship remained distant and would likely never approach true brotherhood. During my most recent visit to Portland, he had joined the family for dinner, his attitude alternating between sullen silence and superficial pleasantries. When he mentioned needing money for tuition, I noticed my parents gently redirecting him toward financial aid applications, rather than offering to cover the expense as they once would have done reflexively. My personal support network had grown stronger throughout this journey. Sarah and Michael remained my closest friends, their unwavering support during the darkest periods cementing bonds that felt more like family than mere friendship. Through their social circles, I had met Claire, a pediatric nurse, whose compassionate nature and emotional intelligence complemented my more analytical approach to life. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and mutual respect. Unlike previous relationships where I had concealed my family history out of shame, I shared my experiences with Claire early on, including the identity theft and subsequent legal proceedings. Her thoughtful response, free from judgment or platitudes, confirmed she was someone who could truly understand the complex emotions surrounding family betrayal and reconciliation. Dr. Lindstrom had recently suggested we reduce our therapy sessions to monthly maintenance meetings. You have developed strong emotional resources and insight, she noted during our last weekly session. You recognize unhealthy patterns quickly and have established effective boundaries. Those skills will serve you well in all relationships going forward. The hard-won wisdom from this painful chapter had shaped my approach to both personal and professional life. As a financial advisor, I now incorporated discussions about family financial boundaries into client consultations, helping parents establish healthy patterns of support for adult children without enabling dependence or compromising their own security. Most importantly, I had learned that self-worth cannot be externally validated. No amount of achievement, success, or accommodation could have earned my parents equal regard during those formative years. The favoritism reflected their limitations, not my value as a person or a son. Forgiveness remained a complex, ongoing process rather than a single act or decision. Some days I felt genuine compassion for my parents, recognizing how their own unresolved issues had driven their behavior. Other days, remembering specific incidents of neglect, or discovering yet another childhood memory tainted by favoritism, anger, would resurface unexpectedly. Dr. Lindstrom assured me this fluctuation was normal and healthy. Forgiveness is not about pretending harm never occurred, she explained. It is about freeing yourself from being controlled by that harm. Some days that freedom will feel more complete than others. Standing firm against my family's exploitation had required courage I had not known I possessed. The decision to file charges to publicly expose the betrayal, rather than absorbing the damage as I had done throughout childhood, marked the most significant act of self-advocacy in my life. That choice had not only protected my financial future, but had catalyzed healing and growth for everyone involved. The experience had taught me that truly caring for others sometimes requires allowing them to face the natural consequences of their actions. By enabling Dylan's dependence and entitlement, my parents had actually hindered his development. Their misguided attempts to smooth his path had ultimately made him less capable of navigating life's inevitable challenges. Perhaps most significantly, I had learned that family bonds, while powerful, do not justify abuse or exploitation. Blood relation does not grant unlimited license to harm. Healthy love sets boundaries, respects autonomy, and seeks mutual growth rather than one-sided sacrifice. As I reflect on this journey from betrayal to recovery, I wonder if my story resonates with your own experiences. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you balance self-protection with the complex emotions of family relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your struggles with family dynamics, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic conversations about life's challenging moments. Remember, standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is essential self-care. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity in your own journey toward healthy relationships.